Hello and welcome back, class, to another episode of Sketch Science. Today we're going back into space, but it's going to be a little bit different. Instead of talking about the stars and everything else, we're talking about some planets and what it means to be in retrograde. Now, back when people first started making ideas about the solar system, they started with something called the Geocentric Model. Geo meaning Earth, and centric meaning center. So they thought that our little Earth was in the center of it all. We're here, everything else revolves around us. Now, today we know that's not true, but back then, this was back in ancient Greece. They had no idea what was up and down when it came to the solar system. They thought, hey, we're standing on this rock in space. We know things go around us. We see the sun every day. The sun over here starts and it goes over our head to this side. Well, then it gets dark, so they think the sun kind of goes underneath, back around. It's the same with the moon. The moon, which does revolve around us, they thought also went around, but it went around at a different speed as the sun, because sometimes it would slowly go across and then disappear over time. Now we know the moon does go around us, but back then they didn't. They thought it was the same thing as the sun, and every other planet or body in the solar system would do the same thing. They all go around and come back. Everything went around us on Earth. This was way back in ancient Greece, but they also noticed a few things were off with that model. They couldn't quite figure out why some things didn't fit that, because if everything worked the way they did, Earth in the center here, everything would just go in circles around it perfectly. And there would be no issues whatsoever. Everything would revolve around the Earth, like we now know everything goes around the sun. Well, they took to looking at the stars one night. They were looking out there, all these stars up in the sky, and they noticed that they all kind of moved the same way every year. They all showed up at the same time. So they figured that that was a big ball going around us in the way outside, kind of like a globe around us that would float around. But occasionally, there would be some stars that instead of moving the normal way, would just kind of start making their way across the night sky at a different speed than all the others. Sometimes they go faster than them. They just work their way across, unlike all the other stars. Well, sometimes one of those stars would take its path and then out of nowhere start going backwards and then flip around and then keep going. This was something we call retrograde. Now, retrograde, how that word comes from, is from retro, meaning backwards. Think if someone's like, hey, that's so retro. It's nostalgic. It's back in time. That's what retro means. And then grade. Grade comes from walk. So backwards walk, retrograde. That is where this comes from, because they saw those wandering stars out in the night sky that move different from all the others, would occasionally turn around and go backwards. Well, in their model, nothing can go backwards. It all goes the same direction. Everything is on that wheel spinning around the Earth. Well, things were going backwards, and it was kind of an issue for them. They couldn't figure it out. So instead, a man named Ptolemy came up with another model. So yeah, Earth is still in the center. The moon still goes around the Earth. The sun still goes around there. But there was a different path that this planet would take, because they didn't know that wandering stars were planets. We now know wandering stars were the planets we saw in the sky. That's why they moved different from all the other stars, is they were the planets in the night sky that they could see from Earth. Now, they thought that the planets would take more of this route around. They'd be going around, but then they'd dip in and go around like that. That's your retrograde cycle right there. That little loop, that was what they called an epicycle. Now, there are plenty of ways that they tried to explain this, whether it be, yeah, they had a suborbit around the sun too, so when the sun went around, when it caught up with that, it had a suborbit around that and then kept going. Or it would get caught in another planet's orbit. Other orbits would affect it. So that's what they were trying to figure out, is why planets would do these little epicycles, which we now know is impossible with an orbit, because if that happened, there would be a lot of issues if planets actually took that motion. But to explain the way they actually took, the path they actually took, the reason why things look like they're in retrograde from Earth. So we know Earth goes in a circle around the sun. Or an ellipse, actually. It's not a perfect circle, it's an ellipse, because how gravity works, constantly falling, we go in a different shape than a circle, because if it was a circle, we'd toilet bowl right into the sun and crash into it. So, our sun's in the middle, the Earth goes around it, and over time, during the months, it moves around in different ways. Meanwhile, we'll take Mars for this example. Mars also goes around the sun, and it moves further away. So it's got a much longer year than us. So take into account, it's got 4 here, 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 and here. So they're all the same distance apart. The Earths are all same distance apart. If you think about it, when you look up into the night sky, so we'll project this out into the stars, the direction we look when we're looking at Mars. Well, the first one, if you draw a line through it, will come up here. The second one comes up here. Third one comes up here, the fourth one comes up here. See how we see it moving like that? It does move along with us. Now, if we take into account the different motion, that's how they believed it was. If we take into account a different motion than that, and we make our circle tighter, there's circle the same around us. That is an awful circle, but we're going to work with it. Earth, 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 and Mars is actually a little bit closer together. So Mars, 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 Mars. Now if we took this angle, we go up, we go up, we go up, we go up, and we go up. Now look at where these end up. They end up here, 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 and it kind of does a loop backwards. That's the idea of a retrograde. Is the angle we look at the planet as we go by. We come out in front of Mars, so as we're looking, eventually instead of looking forward at it, we're looking backwards. It moves forward for such time, it slows down and it goes backwards, but it's all an optical illusion because of where it faces on the Earth. That's the idea of why retrograde happens. It's a little picture of why it happens. The first one wasn't very good, so I had to take a take 2, but yeah, retrograde, it can be easily explained by science, but back then, they didn't know what that was. They just see, hey, the Earth is the center, but this doesn't quite add up now, does it? Now we know why, but then they had to come up with that idea of epicycles. Now, one other thing other than astronomy works with retrograde. Remember when I talked about astrology? Yeah, they talk about retrograde too. I'm not going to get into what their retrograde is. You can look that up on your own. But I used to have a coworker who would always talk about anytime any planet was in retrograde. Hey, Mercury's in retrograde. Mars is in retrograde. Blah, blah, blah. Retrograde, retrograde. I'm like, what does that even mean? And then they're like, well, it means everything's going to go wrong today. And I'm like, well, that's a bad idea. Why did you tell me that? Why would you tell me that? And when it would go wrong, I had something to blame. When it wouldn't, I'd be like, dude, come on. But remember, astrology is not scientific. They take all these things and do fun things with it. Remember, I said it was like some kid wrote a book report about the sky and tried to make a story of it. Someone read it online, liked it, and they're like, hey, we're doing this now. So if you learned anything in this video about retrograde, about planets, about even the history. We'll go into the history of space a little bit more and why they thought what they thought. But this was just a little snippet of information about that. If you enjoyed it at all, please leave a like. And make sure if you have any questions about this, comment it down below. If you have any information about retrograde, especially the astrology side I didn't go into, please leave it down in the comments below. Have a discussion about it. Like I said, I'm not going to shame you for liking astrology. I'm not going to say anything. I know a lot of people that love astrology, but I just don't get it myself. But if you know about it, want to share it with others, please do that in the comments below. And as always, subscribe, because that way you won't miss another video, and those of you who are in my actual class can find this a lot easier. Well, I hope you learned something today, and I hope you continue to learn something every single day you stop by. Have a nice day, and I will see you next time.